Dear Earthmates, in this episode of the Earth Civilization Dialogues, we are hosted by David Walsh in Minnesota. David Walsh is an opera director and also an academic. And we met about 10 years ago, didn't we?
Yeah, roughly.
David Walsh is one of the co-signatories of the Earth Civilization Project in 2013. And we are forming now a network with more Earthmates, and hopefully our synergy will be better. Dear David, how did your love in opera start and directing?
Well, the first question is probably easier to answer. I mean, when I was a teenager, my father brought home an opera recording. It was La Boheme from my mom, but this was like a way back, so it was an LP, but I was the one who listened to it incessantly. I don't know why it triggered something off in me, but it just did. And at a time when other kids were listening to the Beatles and, you know, Rolling Stone and all of that, I was absorbed with opera. However, I didn't imagine that I would end up choosing that direction for a career. I was planning to kind of follow what my father had done, which was, he was a lawyer, and I loved law and politics, which I still do. So I went to university and I studied political science and economics. And while I was in university, it so happened, this was an era where the Metropolitan Opera was still touring, which obviously they don't do anymore. And one of the places they came was Detroit, which, although I was on the Canadian side of the border, I was able to go and see. So I was able to see live opera. And then I got the opportunity to be an extra, or a super, as they call them. You know, the holding the spear thing. And through that, I saw the backstage action. And I'd always been interested in theater, but I had never considered it for a career. But I saw my love for theater and music, and specifically opera, in action. And I thought, I have to do this. So I made that decision. I graduated in political science and economics, and I went to Toronto and took a theater program. And that's how it happened.
Wonderful. And how about teaching at the university?
Well, as you know, many things in life come along unexpectedly. And I never, ever imagined I would end up teaching. I really didn't. A lot of people think of that first and foremost as a direction. I didn't. I had been a professional opera director for years and years, but I was based in Germany, where at that time most of the opera work was. And at the same time, my two, at that point, very young daughters were back in Canada, way out in Vancouver. So I thought, well, I need to be a little bit closer to them when they're young. And so I began applying for some American university teaching positions. And I ended up getting this one in Minnesota. And that's where I came. It theoretically was to be closer to my kids, although I don't know if there's that much difference between a 3.5-hour flight or a 6-hour flight. Both are a long way away. But anyhow, it was really for that reason that I ended up in the teaching realm.
And how come, what happened and how come you were in Istanbul?
That again was another sort of accident of fate. I was asked to do a show up in Duluth, a summer show by a guy who at that point was head of the, I guess he was the dean of the School of Arts at the Duluth branch of the University of Minnesota. And he did a summer opera program. He loved opera. And I went up there and directed a production of Il Trovatore. And lo and behold, there were a ton of Turkish students in that production that had come about because he had gone to university with a Turkish voice teacher, or someone who became a voice teacher, who was a teacher, was actually the head of voice at that point, I think, at the Istanbul Conservatory. I can't remember his last name. His first name was Mafit. And so through that connection, through talking with Mafit that summer, because he had come to Duluth to along with his students, I arranged a workshop in Turkey. I got some funding from here. There was some funding supplied in Turkey. And so I came to Istanbul and I fell in love with Istanbul. I just absolutely adored my time there in Kadıköy, and being able to walk along the sea every day. The Turkish kids were wonderful. They were good singers. They were eager learners. And it was just a whole new world that was opened through that experience. And then when I came back and did a subsequent workshop, and actually now that I think about it, Tariq, that was when I met you, was in 2013, so 8 years ago, through Lynn Trapel, who is an American married to a Turkish guy, businessman. And so through that came the connection with you, with Selman Ada, with the operas that he had composed, which I was directing, and I had never encountered his music before. Lynn was translating. In one case, you had done a translation. So being able to actually experience Turkish opera in that way with the Turkish students and yourself was really an honor and exciting new stage in my career.
I remember you in action teaching the students, working on a scene of Aşk-ı Memnu, Forbidden. How has this COVID thing affected the process?
Everything. Yeah, of course. I should also just add that I was able to do a couple of those scenes, the quintet from Aşk-ı Memnu, I've done several times in opera workshop with my students here, and also the love duet scene that I did in Turkey from Alibaba, where I've been able to do both of those in the English translation, of course. COVID, of course, upended everything for us here as it did worldwide. We had to basically cancel the spring 2020 season. I mean, we continued to do stuff online, but at that point, nobody knew anything. We didn't know how to use Zoom properly, and so it was just like a thrown away semester as far as I was concerned. We were a little better prepared for 2021. And so, as I told you before we started recording, we were able to rehearse using a synchronized system through an app called Jamulus. We were able to do musical rehearsals synchronously, which was a big help. But we still had students in China and Korea. It was really problematic putting all that stuff together, almost impossible to stage. Try staging on Zoom. You know, it's just, you can talk about ideas, but you can't really fulfill them. And in April of last year, we were actually able to do some in-person rehearsal. And it was amazing. You know, I could actually direct a scene in 5 minutes that would have taken me an hour to explain on Zoom. So, you know, but we were able to get some recording done and edit it, and it's a reasonable kind of solution to the problems we had last year. This fall, we have rehearsed in person. We've all been masked, but we rehearsed entirely in person. And of course, that was just so much better. At the same time, you know, the projects have been somewhat smaller scale. And in order to be doable, in order that we can put not too many people in one room. But I have to tell you, last week we recorded everything on stage, and it was the first time I saw some people's faces. Some new students whom I had never met. I only knew them with their mask on. So when they took their mask off to record, it was like, wow. And so fortunately, we have been able to do something like our normal way of working. But anyway, one thing that we've been able to do this fall is kind of celebrate the culture of our students. I don't know if I've even been able to tell you that our whole student body has transformed over the past 3 to 5 years. We now have probably 85% international students, which in our case means Chinese or Korean students. It's like a revolution within our area. And so I decided to program this fall a series of scenes from Korean and Chinese opera and have the Korean and Chinese students sing them. And yeah, and they were actually involved in curating this program, you know, bringing ideas to me. And, you know, I'm really excited about seeing the results of that. We're still editing. And along with that, I did a new chamber opera, a 60-minute opera, which was written during the pandemic by an American female composer. And it talks about, or it addresses the aftermath of an ice raid on a small town in Iowa in 2008. and how the town had to rebuild itself following that, and find a way for people from divergent cultures and races to accept each other and welcome each other and start again. So I think it's a very important piece for our time. And that also will eventually get edited, and we hope to premiere that in early February. That'll go out on all of it digitally. We didn't do any live performance this fall, so all of it is recorded.
I'm looking forward to
yeah, I'll definitely send you the link when we're ready. The Asian opera stuff, which I called kind of semi-humorously AOK, Asian Opera Kaleidoscope, that will come out, I hope, sometime in December. The other one, not till February.
Wonderful. Yes. What would you like to suggest to opera lovers and to opera houses, actually, the managers what do you think opera has to offer today?
Let me answer the second question first, because that really is the most important one. Opera has traditionally, this, been seen as a kind of elitist, exercise. Some people have called it ridiculous, in a way, because who goes around singing? How do you portray stories that way? Well, I'm not going to get into that long back and forth, but what I do believe is that opera in recent times, even before the pandemic, was already evolving away from that kind of notion that it's a limited form of entertainment for privileged people. It's true that it is still one that is by and large a niche area. It's true that it is still, in order to put it on at very high levels, with the major companies, requires a lot of money and therefore wealthy patrons. That hasn't really changed. But what has changed is the desire to make it more expressive of contemporary culture. And that's really healthy. I've long been a proponent of new opera, contemporary opera, which is not to say I don't love the classics. I still love them, and I still do them. But I think we've also got to be of our time. And the question was really whether opera could adapt in a way that would make it possible to be performed in our own time. So I think that is being amply demonstrated by the many, many new composers in every country who have, engaged in writing new opera. And the more when I was in Turkey, I was just blown away by the operas that Selman Ada had written, for many of which you were the librettist. And that was a whole insight into a culture and, its stories, its the things that generated interest in that culture. And the same when I was in Germany. And now in the last, I would say 6 months, I've been introduced to all these Korean and Chinese pieces, both classical and contemporary, in some cases by Chinese American composers. So I think that whole opera world is evolving, and in a really healthy way. And what's really great is that major singers are willing to sing this stuff. This used to be relegated to those who weren't at the top level. Well, the Met just opened this new piece by Terence Blanchard, who I believe is Texan, trumpeter, and called Fire Shut Up in My Bones. And the singers who sang in it, some of them at least, are major Met opera stars, you know, who sing all the big Verdi and Puccini stuff. And that's really exciting development when you have a flagship company like that and others. I would say Dallas Fort Worth in Texas, Philadelphia, which used to be arch conservative, now all programming new work. So I think opera can speak to the current world in a very powerful way. And I think that I don't need to tell general managers what they should be programming. They're already doing it.
Wonderful. And Selman Ada and I, our last co-creation is a salute to Shakespeare. We've done Hamlet. You know, it was there is a 19th century opera or Hamlet. I translated Hamlet. It's the 10th translation into Turkish. It was published last year, and then based on my translation, we worked on the libretto, and now there's an opera, Hamlet in Turkish. We'll prepare its English version. So this is our new news.
That's great.
Yeah. Dear David Walsh, is there anything else you would like to mention?
Well, apropos the Earth Civilization Project, of course, I follow the news of the exchanges as you send them to me. And I know that we're all scattered around the world, and we have, you know, different professions and careers and so on and so forth. But I think what we have realized through COVID is a couple of things. One is how incredibly interconnected we all are. If we didn't know that before, we should be aware of it now. And the second thing is the urgency to address collectively the pressing, the urgent needs of our planet, the one that we share. We really do share this planet, and everything that is done in one place is going to have an impact somewhere else, and vice versa. That's nothing new, what I'm saying, but I think the need for collective inspiration and collective action has never been more apparent. And I think what we saw with the recent climate congress, or whatever it was called, conference in Glasgow, is that governments and the politicians who run them will not willingly make change or make change quickly unless they are really pressed, unless that there is serious action. And I guess the most heartening thing that I found from that whole conference was seeing the engagement of young people, because young people are waking up to the fact that they are being bequeathed a world in very bad shape, right? That has been messed up by neglect or negligence or whatever you want to call it of the people of my generation, you know. And so there's no longer a possibility for acquiescence in this. And so to the degree to which we, and this project which you started so presciently, I would say, can have some impact and share information, then I certainly want to be part of that, you know, for as long as I'm around.
It's always a pleasure to converse with you, to chat with you. I always learn a lot of things from you. Thank you, dear Earthmate, the David Walsh. Make contributions lead to contributions. And we're together. Thank you.
I know that. Thank you very much, Tariq.
Take care.
Okay, take care. Yeah. Ciao. Bye-bye.